this special meeting to order, dated Wednesday, March 25th, 2026. The meeting started 6:37 p.m. at the Early Childhood Center, 270 First Street, Palisades Park, New Jersey. Everyone please rise for the flag salute. Could you read the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, I hereby state the notice of this special meeting has been provided to the public by a written notice dated March 20, 2026. The meeting notice has been emailed to all staff members at the district's 3 school locations, filed with the Board of Clerks of Palisades Park, posted on the district website. Roll call, please. Ms. Sucho, present. Ms. Soo-Young Park,
Present.
Ms. Boyoung Yu, here. Mr. Aaron Peck,
Present.
Mr. Junior, Mr. Sergio Kayed, Mr. Ray Park, Ms. Ingo Kim,
Present.
Mr. Justin Jung,
Present.
Mr. Carl Abado,
Present.
Mr. Emilio De Andrea, and Tyler John.
Yeah.
So today we'll start with the audit report, audit presentation with Mr. Jonathan Waynes will start, you will give us presentation of audit presentation now.
I want to thank you so much for having me tonight. My name's John Weiss. I work for BKC CPAs. We're the auditors for the district. And the purpose of my job tonight is to take the great big book that's in front of everybody tonight and boil it down to some financial highlights. And the place I like to start with is revenues. And if we look at page 1 of our handout, we can see that revenues were down 1.5 million compared to last year. Now, from district to district, big ones, little ones, and the middle ones, my expectation was to see 3 things, and I'm not disappointed in coming to Palisades Park tonight. Number 1, things like preschool expansion aid. A lot of the districts that I audit got a bump in preschool expansion aid from the state, as did Palisades Park. Federal grants. Federal grants are down 3.8 million compared to last year. Just like every other district, the school districts receive the federal art funds. These funds sunsetted at the end of the 23-24, beginning of the 24-25 fiscal year. In Palisades Park case, there was things like a significant HVAC construction project that was charged off to the art grant, and that was finished and fully paid off during the 23-24 school year. There are other things that interest in miscellaneous had a bump. Interest is up for all of my school districts. Most of them, I should say. Palisades Park's no different. Interest is up a little bit for them as well. E-rate is also up. There was a little bit of a bump there last year. General fund state aid. The big part of the general fund state aid increase is the increase in extraordinary special education cost aid. And I'm always a little wary talking about that one, because if you have a bump in extraordinary special education cost aid, obviously the costs have also increased. With regards to the capital projects decrease between this year and last year, this district had a ROD grant for a roof project where most of the work was done during 23-24, balance of the work was done during 24-25, and that's when we realized the balance of the revenue on it. Any questions, comments before we look at some charts together? Okay. Moving on to our charts. We can see that most of the revenue stream is going to be coming from the tax levy. The state sources, that red wedge is a little bit bigger than it's been in prior years, and that's due to the preschool expansion aid. Our yellow wedge keeps getting smaller by the year as the ARP funds have sunsetted. But there still is a healthy revenue stream with regards to the IDEA grant, as well as the Title, significantly the Title I and Title II, Title III, and Title IV grants. Our miscellaneous income, that represents things like interest on bank accounts, facility rental, things of that nature, as well as the E-rate proceeds that we spoke of earlier. And looking at the line chart to the right, what we wanted to do was have a look at the tax rate over the last 10 years. And we can see that 2020 we had a dip, and that was the result of a revaluation. And when we see that, we expect all three lines to come down, and they did. For the most part, the district has held steady as far as the tax rate goes. When I talk about the district, I'm talking about the blue line. And the blue line is the one that you have control over. The green one, that's the municipal, and the purple one is the county one. You don't have a say in that one, but you do have a say in the blue one. Now, in looking at the tax levy, and our bars underneath the green bars, we can see that it's going up, and it's going to go up a bit more in 25, 26. The state sources, our blue lines there, that's up a little bit. We talked about the bump in extraordinary aid earlier in our conversation. That's going to be the bump between 24 and 25. When we look at the federal sources, we can really see the effect of the federal ARP grants illustrated. We can see that really coming in during 23 and especially during 24 as the project was going on, and sunsetting in 25. I tend to think what we see for 21, 22, and 25 is mostly what we're going to be seeing for the foreseeable future for the district in terms of federal funding. Preschool and preschool expansion aid, as we talked about earlier, that went up, and it's going to go up again in 25, 26 during the year we're in now. And looking at miscellaneous revenue on the bottom, we can see the bump, like I say, at most of my meetings, 22, 23, 24, a lot of that's going to be bank account interest. And the bump in 25 is the interest being up a little and the E-rate proceeds that were received. Any other questions, comments before we move on to expenditures?
I'm sorry, what was the, I think I missed, what was the main source for the miscellaneous income surge from 2024 to 2025?
A little bit of that was interest on the bank accounts, and a lot of it was proceeds from the federal E-rate program.
I have a question. Would we have access to that paper, the document that they're looking at now?
I would suggest going to see the business administrator and or superintendent or the board president at the conclusion of the meeting as far as the access to that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Looking at expenditures, now we're going to see some things walk hand in hand from what we talked about revenues earlier, when we talked about expenditures. Total operating expenditures, that's down about about 2.4 million, about 2,370,875. Most of that is going to be your instruction expenses. For tuition, we sent a couple of additional students out of district where they were somewhat large tuition contracts compared to last year. Our student and instruction related services, we have a bit of a bump there. And with instruction and student related services, that's the bump from your preschool aid primarily. If we look at what we've done with preschool aid as far as primarily salaries of teachers and for our purchase services for the preschool program, we can see bumps there, and that's going to account for most of that.
Johnson, if I could just for
Sure.
the board, because after this we're going into a budget presentation. Just want everyone to understand. For the presentation, he's combining your general fund and special revenue fund expenditures. So when we get funding, I know that we spoke earlier why there was a difference, so I just wanted to clarify that for the board before we go into the budget right after.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's very
I apologize,
important.
John.
Because when we do these things, we look at as much of the big picture as we can get beyond
Yes.
this, including all funds. And as business administrators pointed out, the focus on the budget is going to be current expense. So, as the other thing that I wanted to make sure I talked about was the big decrease in capital outlay. We went from 1.4 million to we went from 4.9 million to 1.4 million. As we talked about earlier, that's the sunsetting of the ARP money for those construction jobs. We still had a little bit of a bump in 24, 25, but not to the extent of what we were doing when the ARP grants were going. Any questions, comments before we look at some more charts?
Would you mind, the conversation that, Mr. Albano and I had with you about debt service, since it kind of threw me off? So the
Right.
board understands that.
There is, and there is not debt service in the district. Because the business administrator reached out to me earlier today, and getting into the weeds just a tiny bit, there's a whole separate fund for debt service once you have bonded debt. That means you went out, you went to the voters approved the bond referendum, and now you're tied to principal and interest for a set number of years based on whatever your project is. In Palisades Park's case, there's no bonded debt, no separate fund for it. What this represents is interest on your lease agreement, principal on your lease agreements, that's the principal part. The debt service interest represents a withholding from your state aid. And most districts in New Jersey have a bit of withholding from their state aid for debt services associated with a debt issuance the state did to give everybody money for capital grants, to make a very long story short. So the district does and does not have debt service, no bonded debt, and that's the important thing.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Any other questions, comments before we move on? Okay. Looking at our bar graphs and trend lines. And this is also illustrated in exhibit J4 in your books here, but we present this in bar form. Regular instruction, special education regular instruction, relatively by a bit of a bump this year. Special education, little bump there. Tuition we talked about earlier, that's ticking up, and we knew that was going to tick up when we saw a couple of students we sent out. Students in instruction related services, this, if we look at the chart for state aid for preschool, these are pretty much in line, which kind of sort of makes sense. If these expenses are being bumped up, we probably have a driver for it, and that driver is going to be preschool expansion in this instance. General and school administration, relatively flat, a little bit of a bump in 25. Plan operations and maintenance, this is contingent on what's going on in district. And when I see the 2023 bump, I'm thinking I believe there was a fire in the Lindbergh School. And this may be reflective of that. People transportation is up for most of my districts. I'm not surprised coming to Palisades Park tonight. And benefits are relatively flat, and I suggest that you enjoy that while it lasts, because my last couple of nights have been doing municipal budget presentations where the increase in health benefits is approximately 30%. That's 30. They have not been great conversations.
Mr. Albano, you and I can leave now. He just did our budget presentation.
In looking at the pie charts for expenditures, that's the next page of our handout. My expectation when I walk into a school district is that this pie is going to be filled with green, blue, burgundy, and orange, about 75%. And again, I'm not disappointed in coming to Palisades Park tonight. Regular and special education instruction, that makes up most of our green wedges. Our other instruction, that's co-curricular activities and co-curricular athletics, our coaches and stuff like that. That's our little blue wedge. The light blue wedge, that's our tuition, students send out of district. Students in instruction related services, that's your nurses, your child study team, guidance counselors, the library, things of that nature. General and school administration, the superintendent and the principal and the business administrator's office. Plan operations and maintenance, self-explanatory, a bit for pupil transportation. And employee benefits, that's always going to be a bit of a wedge, and I suspect that wedge will be bigger in the coming years. What we also wanted to do, right below, was have a look at, now that we know the functions, we want to see what we're actually spending the money on when we expense. Not surprised again coming to Palisades Park tonight. My expectation is 2/3 to 3/4 of my pie is filled with salaries and benefits. That's about 71% for Palisades Park. Not surprising. That's how this conversation goes with most of my districts. Our utilities, power and light, 3%, tuition a bit at 8%, supplies 3%, purchase services, things like your child safety professionals, your auditor, your attorney, your architect, and a bit for transportation. Any questions, comments before we start talking about surplus? Okay.
So transportation is not included in purchase services separate, as you says.
Transportation
It
does
says
not
3%,
include the purchase
but you
service,
just
correct.
mentioned that
Yep.
transportation in the purchase services.
Right, the transportation is standalone, so that represents the amount of, there are no purchase services in that, only your actual transportation contract costs and anything related to transportation. Things like aid in lieu of payments to, student parents sending their students to, non-public
I
districts.
see, thank you.
Anything else before we talk fund balance? Okay. And looking at the fund balance part of our financial facts. From last year to this year, the district went down in fund balance or surplus by a little over $913,000. Now specifically, the biggest part where fund balance went down is in excess surplus. And we talk about excess surplus. According to the state of New Jersey, you can have too much money in your general fund. You're limited to 2% of your expenditures, plus any non-budgeted state aid exemptions. In Palisades Park's instance, it's extraordinary special education cost aid. So if we go, and I'm gonna work my way from the bottom up, if we look at the unassigned, unrestricted of 1.476 million, that represents 2% of your expenditures, plus the unbudgeted extraordinary special education cost of about 800,000. Assigned fund balance designated for subsequent year expenses. This is essentially pledging surplus to offset tax increases for your appropriation needs during the budget. Our committed amount, those are encumbrances. Those are for the purchase orders we put in, but we didn't receive the goods or services, and that's primarily the balance due on a construction project that's nearing completion. The district is self-insured for unemployment compensation. So that means when the unemployment claims come in, that fund is used to pay for said claims rather than charging the general fund budget traditionally. Excess surplus, and there's two categories. Excess surplus that was incurred this year, and that's $839,685. And excess surplus that was incurred last year being 23-24. That's $1,309,517. When that happens and you have an excess surplus situation, that money automatically gets budgeted as surplus anticipated to offset appropriations. So when the business administrator did his budget for the 25-26, the year we're in now, $1,309,517 automatically populated. When the business administrator prepared his budget in the last couple weeks, $839,685 automatically populated. The reserve accounts, capital and maintenance reserve. A little bit of a bump in capital reserve, that's bank account interest and some prior year capital projects that were canceled where the original funding source was capital reserve. And the district budgeted and used $350,000 for maintenance reserve in the 24-25 fiscal year. Any questions, comments before we look at some charts?
If I could, just for the board, and as the business administrator and someone new to your district, and this is a conversation Mr. Albano and I have been having, and again, I apologize because this is gonna lead into your budget, your fund balance. Look at the amount of the fund balance decrease, and then that'll be important as we get into the budget discussion.
Looking at our pie chart on the beginning of the next page of our handout, our pie wedges turn from green to blue, the money gets a bit less restricted. We talked about excess surplus earlier. We have some that's earmarked for the 25-26 year, the year we're in now, and the 26-27 year, the year that they're currently budgeting for. Capital reserve, those funds are restricted to what's in the long-range facility plan and those approved projects. Similar, the maintenance reserve is also limited to the projects that are in the district's approved M1 document. We have a restricted small amount for unemployment claims should they come in. Our committed represents our encumbrances. Our assigned represents money that's been already pledged to the 25-26 budget when that budget was done. And unassigned represents the free balance that we have been speaking about earlier, the 2% of expenditures and the unbudgeted extraordinary special education cost aid. And looking at our bar graphs below, we can see that restricted was ticking up, has ticked down for 2025. Encumbrances are relatively stable between this year and last year. And that's really going to really depend on what the purchase order situation is at the end of the year. Unrestricted, we saw a bump there, and that's primarily the extraordinary special education cost aid. And the assigned, as that ticks down, that's money that's being anticipated in the budget from surplus. And looking at our comparison of capital and maintenance reserve, we can see that the district has been utilizing capital reserve. The last real big usage was in 2023 for the local share of the SDA roof project. We talked about that little bit of state aid that the district got for capital projects. There was a 60% match that was made from the capital reserve. The maintenance reserve, the downtick between 2024 and 2025, that represents $350,000. That was budgeted and used during the 24-25 fiscal year. Any questions, comments on surplus? Yes.
So what is this max allowable thing? What exactly is the max allowable?
Now, the state of New Jersey, as we said earlier, in the state of New Jersey, you can't have too much money in things. Now, the maximum allowable part for your capital reserve is going to be limited to your approved projects in your long-range facility plan. And it's 60% of that, with the expectation that the state is going to contribute 40% of that, either through debt service aid or more traditionally through a ROD grant. With respect to the maximum allowable for the maintenance reserve, that's based on a calculation on building square footage and what expenditures are. When we do that document, we get a picture of how much can totally be in there for what projects we intend to have based on square footage.
Comparing across other school districts, are these normal levels?
It depends on the district. It depends on and I do get that question a lot from district, and it depends on what the district's needs are, what funds are available, what you can bank, and things like capital reserve and stuff like that.
So do you see this a good reserve amount, or do you think it's sort of middle, or?
I think
Just like
strictly standing 10,000 feet back, capital reserve can probably use some attention in the coming year should the district be able to provide for it. Maintenance reserve is and has been relatively healthy for the district. Any other questions, comments?
So often this is interpreted as like the district has the financial constraint thing, or not necessarily to be that way. Like to understand this low level of the reserve.
As far as surplus being down compared to last year, maybe?
Oh no, here like capital reserve, the level is very low here.
Right.
Yeah, so that's that can be understood that it's related to the finance struggle here, like it's constraint.
It's
not
contingent
necessary to
on,
be that way, or?
it's contingent on what you can contribute to the capital reserve at the end of the year. And I have some districts who carry an excess surplus, others who don't have an excess surplus and bank everything in capital reserve.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Anything else? I wanted to take a moment and update the board on a conversation we had at last year's meeting. Because we had an audit suggestion regarding real estate taxes due from the borough. And what-
Property tax, right?
Yep,
Okay.
you got it. Now, at the end of the year, June 30th, 2025, the borough still owed June's tax payment. So if you were to look on the B1 exhibit, getting a bit in the weeds, you'll see an accounts receivable for about $2,180,000. In July, the borough paid and the district deposited a payment of $2,211,956. So after that, they had technically overpaid the district just under $32,000. This is something the business administrator and I spent a great deal of time talking on, and we are hopeful this gets reconciled before the end of the year, so nobody is owing anybody anything.
I don't mind I did reach out to the borough, and we recently received our March tax levy payment, which did reflect an adjustment for, it seems like they made up the balance that may have been due. I think we have a timing difference, but I can share, they did make an adjustment in the March payment to make up for some of the lack of the current year's tax payments. The $2,211,000 has been paid throughout the year, but last year, your tax levy somewhere in May or June, you approved that they should be paying us $2,267,000. So they made up for that difference, and it seems like they may have paid a little bit more than due, but the good news is they made an effort to catch up to what they owe us. So hopefully we can get it cleaned up by the end of the year.
So Mr. Jonathan, so this kind of confusion by being paid between June and July from the borough, is it pretty common, or how does that
I
be
don't
more
come
simpler
across
for
that
us
very
to-
often. Typically, with the districts, the money's all in by the end of June, and you don't have a receivable from the borough.
It's been like every year going, right? And then, I don't know if you record the 3 years ago that you first found that unpaid tax levy, and there was $54,000 that was reflected all to this calculation, or how?
It seems that there was a lot of confusion here and with the borough as to what to do with that, because getting a bit more into the weeds, I confirm all the real estate tax payments from the borough. I reach out to them directly, and they had that amount included on there, on the return confirmation. And I followed up with them, saying, hey, you know what, you have this, I wanna make sure that maybe this was posted in the wrong account, something like that, and I had to go talk to the finance people there, and it turns out they put it on and forgot to take it off because they voided the check.
Yeah,
Which confused the heck out of me, because I'm like, okay, wait a minute, we gotta make sure this is right, because I have to talk to the business administrator about this and make sure my ducks in a row before I start bothering him about this. I am hopeful that, this does get resolved this year, as he intimated, though.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
so you reach out to the municipal governments as well, like if there's some confusion in it, or it has to be our side to contact them?
I have to compare, and when they don't work out, then I will reach out.
Okay, so this is not the state yet that you need to reach out?
No, not at all, not at all.
Thank you.
Now, a word or two about the audit. What we typically do is we come in, we look at everything from payroll registers to vouchers to minutes of board meetings to the school cafeteria records to even the enrollment and transportation reports that are filed by the district. We have some recommendations that we're gonna go over with the board tonight as the result of our audit. And I wanna, we're gonna go through each one of them, because there are a number of them.
To the board members, that's what he's referencing. Jonathan, are you gonna work off of this or the big one?
Oh, either the synopsis or the auditor's report
Well,
to management, same stuff.
You have the AMR that they have.
Yep,
So
I have it
whatever you want.
right here on mine.
Good, there you go.
I have the messy copy, my copy.
Oh, you're using the synopsis, which they did receive also. You gave that as the synopsis? It's a smaller handout. I'm sorry, it says
So everybody
synopsis of
finding it
what?
okay?
Yeah, the bigger one or the?
No, you're gonna refer to the synopsis of what?
Just make sure all the way at the end, let's go a little bit further in the synopsis, starting right there. You have these pages okay here, Dan, or? A little bit, one more. One more, and I keep saying one more, I'm running on. Right there, that's where we're at. Okay, very good.
The last two pages. There you go, on your left hand side. Go in the other, I guided you to the wrong.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, that's on you. Go to that report, the last two pages.
Okay, and talking about the recommendations, most of them are going to be in the financial planning, accounting, and reporting section of the auditor's report to management. The first one, we selected vouchers primarily for the IDA grant and noted that there were a lot of missing approval and receiving signatures on those. Something that clearly indicates that the expense was approved and the goods or services were received. We want to make sure that's very clearly indicated on all payment forms. The state requires a political contribution disclosure form be awarded for all contracts awarded on a non-fair and open basis that aggregate to over $17,500. We had several audit exceptions for these forms not found during the year. The Board of Education should designate someone to prepare the e-cert. The e-cert is a required statutory filing that details that you're in compliance with federal and state wage reporting for tax purposes for administrative officials of the district. We want to make sure that anyone who is entitled to a pension is enrolled in the pension system timely and accurately. We want to make sure that the position control roster is followed and reflects what's actually being charged in the board secretary's report for expenses for salaries. We want to make sure that the uniform chart of accounts is used for charging budget expenses, and I'm thinking particularly of a refund that was posted incorrectly and some capital items that were charged to current expense current expense items that were mistakenly charged to capital that had to be moved around. We want to make sure that the board secretary's report is presented to the board in a timely manner. We want to make sure that the district has appointed a reconciler or treasurer of school monies. We didn't think it was effective last year, the program that they did, since the business administrator has gone out and gotten the district a treasurer. That is a true good second set of eyes on these things. We want to make sure that the treasurer's report is also presented and approved by the board in a timely manner. For the school food service account, this is a conversation I've been having with more and more of my districts. Districts have point of sale systems in place, and it's important that when students use the funds and accrue money, that the district get paid for the lunches. As they come in, the receivable balance has gotten pretty big in the last couple of years, and we want to make sure that it's being addressed. And it's not a Palisades Park specific thing. I've had to have this conversation with several of my districts as far as keeping an eye on the point of sale balances where the student owes money and to collect that money in as timely a fashion as possible from the parents. In the last recommendation, it was part of the last handout, we wanna recommend that the amount requested for real estate taxes agree to the amount approved in the state budget. We wanna make sure there are no more over or underpayments of real estate taxes and everybody walks away even Steven at the end of the year. I'll be happy to take any other
Can I
questions,
just make a
comments,
comment on the cafeteria receivables?
Yes.
Just for the board, as I've been doing this, doing my interim work for the last 4 or 5 years now, I can share with you that has been a consistent recommendation that I've seen in audits as I'm doing this interim work. But understand that a big part of the discrepancy is that there was a period of time during COVID when meals were being served free. And when they transitioned from being free to having to apply for applications again, parents didn't realize they had to reapply because they were getting free lunches. So many districts are now trying to implement processes to make sure all the applications are being received. And the other piece of this is that you must serve a meal to a child. So if the child walks up to the register and they don't have money, the district must still serve a meal. Years ago, you were able to give an alternate meal. They felt that that was inappropriate because now you're identifying a child who may not have the resources to pay for a meal. So now the child receives the meal as any other meal, and then the district must then go and try to collect the funds from the parents. It's a horrible situation, but we must feed the children. We cannot deny them a meal. So at some point in time, we'll have to put a process in place. What many districts do is send out via email a notification to the parents that you have a balance due. And once we start doing that, it'll be amazing to find out how many parents come forward and say, how do I have a balance due? No one notified me. So that is something that I will have to work on, to have a process in place to at least get notifications out to parents that their child has a balance due.
Any other questions, comments, issues, concerns? My contact information is on the bottom of the, oops, is there something?
Yes, sir. You mentioned the last, like, page 11, like, corrective action plan, like, that would be just, it would be just like these findings, right?
These are recommendations that do require corrective action, so there will need to be an approved corrective action plan for this. And the business administrator is always.
I'll have to work on that, yes.
Yours, right?
Yes, that's for me.
Okay, right, okay. And, let's see. Thank you.
Oh,
I think we need
anything
to,
else
we
for
need to
us?
digest more, but, cause I see that repetitive in occurring same findings over years and,
3 of them, I think, were repeat findings.
yeah. So that parts have to be addressed in our district.
Michelle, you mind? I just want to personally thank Jonathan.
Yeah.
First time I've met him, I want to say thank you, Jonathan, to you and your staff. You were tremendously helpful, understanding the transition that the 3 of us plus some others in our office went through during this tough time. So I just want to personally thank you. Your staff and yourself were very professional. And I look forward to working with you much earlier next year to do the audit than we did this year. And thank you for everything.
Thanks, Leah, we are very grateful for that. And I wanna thank everybody for their time tonight. My contact information is on the bottom of the first page of the handout. Should there be any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. I see you mentioned about difficulties of this year that have been delayed by the administration turnovers. We deeply appreciate what you're doing. job at this moment. So hopefully, as Mr. Emilio say, that next year will be in timely manner, and I hope to see you
It's
soon.
everybody's
again.
hometown that you see me in December.
Yeah,
Earlier.
thank
Ah,
you.
early, oh my goodness. Well, thanks so much, everybody, have a great day.
Thank you for coming up, Jonathan. Oh, do you want me to
Thank
work
you.
the,
Have a good night.
You want me to work it or you want
So now, our administrators will give us a tentative budget presentation. Will be just Mr. Albano.
Both of us.
Both of you.
Yep, you get two tonight.
Mr. Albano, our superintendent, and Mr. Emilio Brenner, our business administrator.
So, I invite the audience to turn around. We're going to present some slides in the back of the room. And board members, if you choose to move a little closer, by all means. And what I'm going to ask, I think we will go through these slides, and then, of course, our board members are invited to ask questions. But certainly, if you have an important question during the process, but maybe it's good to wait for the entire presentation because you may have a question that is answered later. Emilio and I are going to go through this. This is, just to frame this is the tentative budget presentation. The final budget presentation has to be adopted by the board after the county approves the tentative budget, and that will be, I think the time frame is either very late April or early May. There's a window for the final budget. So this budget is not final. It's our best thinking at this point based on the information we have. It is subject to change. You may hear me say that more than once. Was that a thing? I could just use my laptop. Oh, there we go. Is my connection down here? I can use the laptop. Let me just, that's easy. All right, I'm stationary. So, the Board Finance Committee and the Business Office started by establishing some goals. The first is to stay within the allowable tax levy, and I'm going to just elaborate on this. You may be aware that New Jersey has a 2% tax cap. However, when inflation was running 2% or less, and for many years, like from 2010 and 6-8 years that followed, inflation was very low. And the Fed had a target rate of 2%. The 2% tax cap worked much better at that point in time. More recent years, and I'm going to show you some information, inflation spiked, you may recall, after COVID, and it's still running high. And because of that, New Jersey allows you to go above 2% whenever there are some extraordinary expenses that are increasing much more than the rate of inflation or than that 2% cap. And you heard the auditor talk about healthcare, and that's going to be a big part of this evening's story. But our allowable is much higher than 2%, and I will elaborate more as we move through. The second one, definitely support the priorities. It's about students, it's about learning, it's about education. Everything we do in this budget has to be with that focus. We're trying to reduce our reliance on fund balance for expenditures. I'm going to explain more about that later, but you did hear that our fund balance was lower at the end of this audit, was the end of 2025, it was lower by over 900,000. We believe we've been using too much fund balance and we need to reduce our reliance on fund balance. We're looking for organizational efficiencies. That is just an ongoing goal. As new technology develops, if there are more efficient and better ways to do things, and it can
save some money and keep that money in the classrooms with the children. We're always looking for those opportunities, and we did that with this budget. We have to plan long-term for our facilities. There are quite a number of projects, even in this building alone. We did have a roof failure. We are working on getting that scheduled for a summer replacement. But we need to stay on top of our facilities, and it's always better to try to be proactive with facilities as opposed to an emergency repair, especially when school is in session. So we're doing our best, going forward to really pinpoint what's needed and plan that proactively. And then the last goal would be to ensure a transparent and effective budget communication with the community, with the board, of course, and that's part of what we're doing this evening. By the way, this will be posted for the community, so if you don't feel like taking notes, and you certainly can photograph it, but it'll be posted on the website by tomorrow. Okay, we do have a very challenging year. A lot of expenses have gone up. Emilio, we don't really have this rehearsed. You jump in when you think it's appropriate, because Emilio understands the numbers a lot better than I do. These we identified as the 4 big areas that are really giving us a challenge. Again, to be repetitive, health benefits, and this is not just Palisades Park. This is all municipalities, all school districts throughout the state of New Jersey that participate in the state health benefits plan. So a 31% increase is probably unprecedented. We don't remember a rate that high. There's been rates that are way above the tax cap, 6, 8, 10%, but this is highly unusual, and it presents a real unique challenge this year. Special education programs and services, you did hear the auditor speak about, we have a few more students, not a large number, but more students that have special needs that are placed out of district, and part of our challenge is we lack space. So if we had more classroom space, we could probably create new programs for children with a disability here, and I think that would be something that our parents would welcome, but it's been a challenge because of space, quite frankly. So we have a legal obligation. If we don't offer the program here and a child has special needs, then we must send them out to a school district or the county programs that are appropriate for the children. And that is a legal responsibility and a moral responsibility. Inflation, I'll give you a little more data there, but again, inflation is really sticky. You hear the economists talk about it being sticky, and now of course we have world events where we see gasoline prices going up, and I think it's fair to assume that in the months ahead, because gasoline prices affect everything else, right? Deliveries, plane fare, so we kind of anticipate that inflation will not drop to that 2% Fed target rate. It's going to probably hover above 3 and potentially go higher. No one has a crystal ball, but we are concerned about that. The fourth area are salaries and contractual obligations. So, our employees are also dealing with inflationary pressures, in their households. So I think the district has made every effort to offer salaries in that 3 to 3.5% range, salary increases, to help employees keep up with inflation, right? But if you have a 2% tax cap, again, and you're offering 3.25% salary increases, that's hard to sustain. So here's an example of the benefits. They rose by almost 1.3 million over the past 4 years, just to give you a perspective. But from this year to next year, we're projecting they'll go up an additional 1.6. So in 1 year, they're going up more than they went up in 4 years. And that 4-year growth number is high. And then, jump in.
So,
Please.
obviously, the big number that sits out there is that 1.6. So as Mr. Albano has indicated, from December to January, when the rates came in, we saw the 31% increase. So the good news is, I know what the first 6 months from July, December, that number is. I now included because there's no indication that we may not see another big hit, 30% for 6 months. So built in, the increase that just came through, plus another 30% increase for the first 6 months of the next, well, the last 6 months of the next fiscal year. Again, I can't sit here and tell you, will it be 30 again? Will it be back down to 10? There's no indication, but we had to take the conservative approach that we have to prepare once again for another hit in case it does come.
So Emilio can look at a spreadsheet with numbers and figure out the story. I need visuals. Our brains work a little differently. So I also find that communities do appreciate visuals, and Jonathan had a lot of visuals as well.
Yes.
So we're compatible here. So this just gives you a visual of health and pension and social security and dental, all of the benefits that our employees receive. The increase over a 5-year period. And again, you look at percentages, this is incredible. But 7.4, 8, 7.8, and now 31%. That's compounding. And again, that in a 2% tax cap, that just is not sustainable. It's not. How do you manage that kind of dramatic cost increase? Additionally, as the new central office team settled in, we learned about 30 of our employees had not been enrolled in the state pension. And this is a legal requirement. All employees of the school district that are full-time employees and even part-time employees have a pension option. So we needed to work on getting them enrolled. Some only dated back 2 or 3 years, others dated back over 10 years. And what you need to do is, when you discover something like this, you enroll your employees in the pension, they do the calculations, interest, penalties, back payments, and the pension system sends you a bill. So we have over 380,000 in bills right now in the business office, but there's still a few employees that we haven't received calculations for. So the 400,000 is, I think, a very realistic estimate of what we will owe the New Jersey State Pension System to make all these employees whole. So now they are enrolled properly, but now we have to manage this payment, and I share because it's just an added significant budget challenge. This shows you those placements that I talked about. You do see a steady increase. And what we're having internal discussions about is, can we somehow creatively analyze our classroom space? And there's no easy answer, but if we could free up 1 or 2 classrooms, and we do have 3 or 4 children with similar needs, could we potentially hire a high quality teacher and a paraprofessional and whatever related services are needed and build a program here? So then you save not only the tuition, but you save all the transportation costs of sending children to other districts. You have 31, I will tell you this, you will never have 100% of your children here, because if a child has unique needs, we're not a big district. We can't offer every level of special education services. If you have 10, 15,000 students, they tend to have more range of programs. So for us, I would think, probably at least half or 2/3 of these children with specific needs will still need to go to other district placements. But if we can even bring 6 or 8 or 10 back, some of the placements are upwards of 70,000, 80,000 per child. And again, then the transportation cost. So it's something we're working on, but really a big challenge is the space. And I don't have a simple answer, but we are examining that closely. Here's the inflation I talked about. So I guess we'd all like to forget in 2022 when prices went up 8%. This is right from the federal, government's inflationary rates. But again, the blue line represents your tax levy increases. And I think the district has tried really hard to be respectful, with New Jersey being so heavy on property tax, one of the highest taxed states in the country, right? So you're trying to be mindful of the homeowner and the property owner and maintain reasonable increases at a time where other prices are going out of control. But inflation, like it hits our households, our families, it hits businesses, it hits the schools. And that's an important message, to deliver. We have fuel expenses, we have transportation, we have to put diesel gas in our buses, food costs, energy costs, electric. Inflation hits us as well. And that's where I'm pleased to see that last year, the allowable tax levy increase enabled the district to go to 3.2%. So now you see it's kind of evening out, but for the previous 5 years, you really were losing ground on your revenue. Costs were outpacing your ability to raise revenue is how I would describe it. So this is actual spending, and if you're listening carefully to the auditor, in addition to, let's take the year that he audited, $32,035,605. He also added money that we get for preschool, federal grants for special programs. This, we're getting down to just the general fund budget. And the majority of that 32 million, there are some state funds and some other sources of funding, but the majority is by local tax dollars, okay? But even look at our spending, just with the general fund, again, you're just seeing that trend of 4.5% increase, 10.5% increase, 4.33, and again, that's, I know I sound very repetitive, but I think you're getting the idea that a 2% does not work. This just breaks it down more in a narrative to give you a little more perspective on it. The increase over those years, 25.8 million to over 32 million, to 6.2 million increase, 24%, just summarizing it. The range of spending went from a 3% increase to the highest year of 10.4%. And again, at the risk of sounding repetitive, it's an important point that this is just hard to do with the tax cap. So you may be wondering, well, gee, how did the district do it? And this is part of the explanation. So the auditor kind of closed out our last fiscal year, 24-25. And you never budget to the penny, because by law, we can't overspend our budget. So, correct me if I'm wrong, you always have a little bit of contingency. So if you're doing a good job, you're anticipating all your expenditures, all 32 million of it, whatever it is, and maybe you have 2 or 3 or even 4% surplus, okay? And again, you need that money because unexpected things come up. We're building a budget now for 26, 27. It's hard to predict what's gonna happen 6, 8 months down the road. So you do sometimes get hit with surprises, but if you're fortunate, you have a 3, 4% surplus, and then that rolls over into fund balance or your savings. And there's different categories. We have a fund balance for capital projects. That's how we plan to pay for the roof replacement that we're planning. You have the maintenance fund balance, and then you have the unassigned fund balance, which is really for emergencies. So the district, to try to not reduce program, not do layoffs or reductions, we're using their savings for these past 4 years. So you see back in 2021, it was a very manageable amount of savings. And by the way, this is perfectly legal. There's nothing wrong with doing this, but it's reasonable to use 400,000 or even 500,000 in 2020, 2021, 22. Because you can reasonably anticipate that you're gonna have 6, 7, 800,000 in surplus, so you replenish that, right? And your savings doesn't get depleted. However, you see that we started becoming more and more dependent on the savings to using it for operating expenses. So 1.6, almost 1.7, 1.648, then a huge dependency on your savings in 24-25 of 2.2 million. And then this current year that we're in, over 1.8 million in fund balance has been allocated to keep this district operating. The problem with this strategy is that it's good for a one-time fix, but that fund balance eventually goes, so year over year, the auditor just told us your fund balance went down by 900,000. So if you don't bring up your revenues and you keep spending, you're gonna hit a wall. And we are hitting that wall. And basically, again, just a little more narrative. Expenditures rose faster than revenues over the past 4 years. The district relied on fund balance to close the gap. Your fund balance is declining, and now we are left with a structural budget deficit, and we have pressure, and we need to address it. We need to bring the revenues more in line with our spending, and that's no easy feat. So again, just using fund balance, I think if you're allocating 400, 500, 600,000, and it also varies place to place, because you have to have a good sense of how much contingency did I build in my budget. Well, I think I'm going to have a 600,000 surplus at the end. Is it going to be $1 million surplus at the end? So those are all questions. But again, the 2.2 million, the 1.8 million, in my judgment and Emilio's judgment, is simply way too high.
And if you don't mind,
You want to speak
the
on
1.8, keep in mind that several months ago, we came to the board and requested to use an additional $840,000 for the 25-26 budget, because what we inherited would not suffice to carry us through the year. I can sit with you today, to the best of my abilities, of that 840 that we had to ask for additional, I'm down to about 500,000. So it was needed, and especially when the the health benefits bill came in, we needed it. So it's 1.8, but we did use another 840, so it's really about a 2.4 million use of fund balance. We were fortunate in that you heard from the auditors the extraordinary aid. Since it was not a budgeted line item, we were able to use it. So we didn't put it up here because it was really allowed, but it was supplemented by another $840,000 that was not raised through the tax receipt.
Okay. We'll move past this. Last year, again, I pointed out that it was good that we went above the 2% cap to 3.2, but we didn't make up much ground, again, because there was such a heavy reliance on fund balance, and you went from 2.2 to 1.8, so year over year, the budget only increased by 50,000. And all of our expenses went up much more than 50,000.
And if I could,
Of course.
you would need to understand how to read the state formatted budget to see the 50,000. I know how to read it, so that's why we put it here. If you would look at last year's, it does not reflect the true 50,000, but that's all adopted budget to adopted budget actually went up for last year. So you went out for 3.2, but only an additional 50,000 in expenditures were applied. Thus why we probably needed the 840 in addition for this year.
So for the past 4 years, the district used a significant portion of fund balance, one-time revenues, supported operations, you avoided cuts, you kept taxes low, you really did your best for the taxpayers. However, right now, that no longer can be done. Our fund balance is declining, and we have less surplus to offset the cost going forward. Our reality is we have a structural budget gap. One-time resources are no longer sufficient, meaning fund balance. We have to try and make every effort to all of our recurring costs, all of our legal requirements, contractual requirements, all of those things we need to run the district, we have to try to get the revenues to match the expenditures. If I had to break it down in a really simple comment. So, that's the tough news. So now, I'm gonna pause and just do our board members, the audience later I think has an opportunity. Do our board members have any questions about anything I covered thus far? For me or Emilio? We can keep going, and at the end, okay. So, we've been meeting many long hours, evenings. We met with the finance committee. They've seen a lot of this information. The entire board hasn't seen this full presentation yet. This is the first time this evening. But we are working internally with the admin team and having a lot of long, thoughtful discussions. How do we address this issue? Well, the first thing is right away, and I feel bad about this, but we're implementing strict controls, right? So teachers who put in for very legitimate conferences, quality conferences. We did support some in the beginning of the year, but I am at this point saying unfortunately no, because we have to just control expenses. I don't like saying no, but we have to be mindful there's limited funding. We're doing everything to maximize our federal funds, the work on grants, the state funds. You know, the preschool here, by the way, costs the taxpayers nothing. Well, indirectly, because you do pay state taxes. So the state funds the preschool, but it doesn't come out of your property taxes. And it's a real wonderful thing that you're offering this community, because you know, private preschool can cost upwards of 15, 18,000, but here it's free of charge. And we have 170 students in the ECC. We have a partnership program with the New Christian Academy. So this is a real benefit, and I want to emphasize that that is not a burden on the local taxpayers through their property tax. Sorry to digress, but we believe we definitely have to reduce using fund balance, and there is no choice in that really. And we have to look at staff and try to reduce operational cost, and this is always a really difficult decision to have. I did, just so the board knows, I did send out an email to the staff saying that we have to have a discussion about staff reductions, because our employees represent well over 70% of the budget. You know, things like materials and paper and supplies and pencils, that's such a small fraction of a school budget. Even books, you would think, but really the bulk of the money, and the way it ought to be, we're in the people business, right? We're in the education business. So you need professionals to do that work. But that is where the bulk of the money is, and when you're facing a budget deficit and a challenge like this, you have to look at reducing staff if you're going to get your budget under control. So this, I want to emphasize, has not been decided. It's a proposal, and again, this will be posted because I want to be very transparent. I don't want to have people panicking, because we went through a tough time last year, and a lot of people left the district. We had a significant amount of turnover, and I really don't want to see that happen again. But I also need to be transparent, so it's a bit of a balancing act. These categories may change, but to close this budget deficit, what it would take would be 2 less administrators district-wide, not saying who or what the title is. We're just saying 2 administrators. The 4 aides that you see we employ directly, they're required for children's IEP. There's no room there. Same thing with the bus driver aides. They're absolutely necessary. If we contracted our busing out, we would pay more. So we have 4 people here that drive for us, and it's a big cost savings. So they are very valued employees, and they're wonderful. But it's also a big cost saver. Clerical, we had the +1. You may say, how can you be adding in a budget crisis? But there was a person out on leave who has returned now. So that really is kind of staying flat. But from this current year to next year, it is a +1. And that gives you 10 total. Custodial maintenance workers full-time, we only have 9 full-time facilities people in the district, and we think we need to maintain all 9. There's, we have a lot of grounds, a lot of square footage, So, we just don't see any ability to reduce that number. However, in the evening and mostly after school hours, we do hire part-time custodians. Most of them work like 25 hours a week. And this is a real hit, but again, we have to close the gap. Some decisions need to be made. So we are proposing, it's not definite yet, and we have to do a lot more analysis, but reducing that number by 8. Exempt employees, that's more, central office staff. It's a lean staff, okay? That's gonna stay flat. That's like your payroll clerk, your necessary, your accounts payable, there's functions that you absolutely need. Then teachers, certificate support staff, that is just all the people that work with children. That's your biggest group, of course. But teachers, psychologists, guidance counselors, social workers, they all fall into that category. I am not tonight prepared to say exactly who or exactly what title, but if we can, through attrition, avoid layoffs, we're gonna do that as much as possible, but I can tell you there will need to be some reduction. Will the number be 18? I'm hoping it doesn't have to be 18. But right now, just based on the information we have, we're putting that number in as a placeholder, and Emilio and I met with the admin team this morning, being fully transparent, and I can't make the decision of what, my main charge to them is what is the least negative impact to children? What reductions could be made that will be the least negative impact to our students? And to their credit, they stayed for 3 hours, locked down in a room. It's a confidential meeting at this point, but we're throwing around ideas, but we're not sharing that publicly because that process is evolving. And Emilio continues to look for financial resources and other things that we can do. But this is a possibility, it's not a definite. But this is a real challenge, because I will say this, my analysis is I don't think Palisades Park is overstaffed. I really don't believe that. But the money has to come from somewhere. Most of you may know we use an agency, ESS, for our paraprofessionals. We have 68. These are people like our kindergarten aides, our preschool aides, one-to-one, two-to-one aides for special education programs. We're doing our best to see if there's the ability to reduce that number by 6. But if a child has a one-to-one aide on their IEP or a two-to-one aide and there's 2 children with an aide, by law you have to provide that. So there's not much wiggle room here. So summing it up, again, right now, preliminary thinking, not definite, but we may need to reduce overall 33 positions, and we're trying to kind of have it across different jobs, not all concentrated in one area, and this may shift. It may shift, because again, I think our goal needs to be, in making these tough decisions, how do we protect children and education and preserve that to the best of our ability? Emilio, I'm gonna let you close it up.
So based on the information that we've been able to compile together, through the budget process, we do qualify for what they call as a health cap waiver, which came out to roughly about $1.3 million, which can be applied to the taxes, which thus brings us to 6.74 for a tax levy increase with that. It only increases the budget by $771,000, budget to budget. Keep in mind that we talk budget to budget. The new budget for next year is at $33,784,000 with the maximum allowable tax levy based on the calculations. And as I was working through these numbers, through the state program, it gives you edits and resolved a good portion of, the edits are still there, I'm not concerned because they don't hold up the budget. I do have one thing I have to work through, so we feel very confident this evening that this is the budget that will go down to the state if the board supports the 6.74. We are very cognizant 6.74 is a hit. But trust me when I tell you, we are getting the same feedback. You will start hearing other school districts coming out with very similar numbers. We do know Leonia's about to present a 6. We heard Ridgefield 7. Other districts are starting to see the same pressures. A good portion of them, the numbers are being driven by the state health benefit number that came out that hurt many, many districts, and you heard your auditor, not just districts, municipalities. So it's an impact on both sides. So we are doing our best. Again, we want to emphasize the cuts that we're recommending are not set in stone. It more or less, we had to get to a number. For those that were at the last board meeting, we talked about a $3 million deficit. That's basically what we spent from the last board meeting to now. How can we get there? So we had to apply offsets in certain areas. Reduce here, reduce there. I use the term other areas. I looked at prior year spending. Some account line items, I rolled all the way back to the 22-23 actual expenditures, just to try and find the money so that it's the least amount of damage to staffing. Our goal is not to impact education, but when you talk teachers, you talk education. So our goal between tonight and the adoption of the budget, which is tentatively scheduled for the 27th, we have a lot of work with the administrators. We spent 3 hours brainstorming. Well, if we do this, how can we save here? If we reduce here, can we put another body back in? So we do have a lot of work still ahead of us to minimize the impact on the education.
Anyone that was listening in last week, we did start this conversation. The board very thoughtfully asked about tax impact. Aaron, I think in particular, how does this affect a homeowner? What can they expect in the way of actual dollar increases based on the value of their home? So Emilio did a lot of calculation and work, but I want to emphasize we're not the tax assessor, we're the school district. So that work and the specific tax increases that a homeowner will experience will come later, but we do have a pretty good idea. But I want to emphasize we're going to show figures that were calculated in-house, but they are estimated figures based on an analysis of other taxes. So Emilio, why don't you explain this chart?
So I actually reached out to some board members to send me their tax bill, just so I can get a reference point. I was unable to communicate with anyone in the borough to give me some written information. So this is based on the tax bill that I received. I was able to back into certain numbers. So that's why we put that disclaimer. I am not a tax person. I just work backwards into numbers. But I always like to break things down into 100,000s, because it seems like you can look at your assessment, use 100,000 and you can do it. So basically, right now, we're estimating for every $100,000 of assessment, it's an additional $47 a year. But again, keep in mind, when we talk assessed, it is not market value. A lot of people confuse market value with assessed value. You have to specifically look at your tax bill and tells you what your home is assessed at. So this was an effort on my part to give board members information. I'm hopeful that I got it right, but I am not a tax expert. I took certain numbers and they calculated correctly, so that's why we felt comfortable presenting it. But again, every home is different, but if you use your assessed value by 100, it kind of brings you into the ballpark.
So to close it out, and again, sorry to be repetitive, but I think it's important to be clear. What we're asking the board to do this evening is potentially support a tentative budget and tax levy increase of 6.74%. That is not the final budget. It'll go up to the county. If the county approves it, it comes back to the board. You at that point can say to us, look, we've gotten feedback. We've heard from the community. It's too high. You know, we need to drop down to 5.74 or 4.74 or even lower. And we certainly would understand that. You know, these are challenging times for many people. And, you know, another increase on your property taxes is not easy with all the other increases that people are experiencing. But we're here to say that every percent we drop, it's important to understand, it represents about 270,000.
Full percent, yes.
So a full percent drop. So you could go from 6.74 to 5.74, but then we have to find additional cuts or reductions. And just to put it in perspective, 270,000 is probably 3 teaching positions. So, you know, as it is, these reductions are really, really difficult on the district. If we had to do another 3 or another 6, and the board really, and it's, you know, we appreciate the board volunteers. This is a really challenging decision for all of you, and there's just no easy answer. But I will say this as a video, you know, other districts, this problem is not unique to Pal Park. And you probably hear me say that over and over. This 31% health on top of, you know, ongoing health increases there. You know, 7%, 8%, nearly 8%, then 31%. You know, that's important because you got to look over time to realize how significant this is. So, with that, we'd love to take questions from the board on a lot of information, but we're happy to take questions or comments or whatever.
And then I'll address.
Oh, do you want to?
No, let's say if there's questions on the slide first.
When exactly does the 31% becoming enacted? When do we start paying that increase?
January 1st.
It happened.
It happened.
We're already
The
paying it.
difference between our December health benefit bill and our January health bill is roughly $39.
So you're saying you're estimating that we're gonna get another 30% next year
I put it in, yes.
as an estimate, but isn't that highly unlikely because
No.
wouldn't that decimate?
I wish I can tell you yes or no. I don't know. I have to budget. Again, we'll find out. Last year at this time when we were doing budget presentations, state wasn't talking about 30% increases.
What were they saying back then?
For when I remember, they were talking more low 20s, high teens. So it's unpredictable. And health costs across the board, I mean, right now in this district, if you're a person with a family plan, the premium is roughly $75,000 a year for health prescription and dental. That's more than most salaries to cover, and that's for a family plan.
Oh, so is this tied to the fact that, the aid was rejected by the administration, wasn't it? Is that what it's related to, all this health, anyway?
No, the health is, we have no control over it.
Right.
We have a state health plan, that's the increase. The increase, it's calendar year, just to be clear. It's not, so we operate on a fiscal year, July 1st through June 30th. The health increases are calendar year, January 1st through December, end of December. So we potentially could have another significant mid-year increase. And again, if you look back, you know, maybe it won't be 31, but what if it's 24? What if it's 20, you know, and again, I hope it's not the case because it would be just extremely challenging. But again, the other thing about this allowable tax levy of 6.74, the state acknowledges that districts can't handle this kind of increase. So that's why a 2% tax cap in New Jersey, they're allowing you to go higher to deal with this increase. It's not just by chance that they let us go that high. It's a calculation, we have to submit all our information, and they tell every district. Other districts can go 7.5%, others maybe only 5%. But Pal Park got its calculation, and again, it's based on our need. So please, other questions?
So for the board members, you're understanding that, because the board leadership and finance committee had a few meetings regarding this for the presentation. So for your understanding, so Mr. Abadi, correct me if I'm wrong, so you are presenting that, potential 30 position cut, right?
Yes.
And then the 1% if you reduce, tax levy increase, then on additional 3 position cut, so it's going to 33.
Yes.
And another 1%, 36 people will be laid off. So it's a very challenging decision for you guys.
And again, we're gonna be spending the next month refining, looking, determining, making judgments as to what's the best way to adopt the budget for next year. So we're doing our best to work through it and all that, so. When we're done with questions, I did have the board a handout that I just wanna point to certain things, and so that the community can hear as to other factors that drove some of the, decision making. So, do you wanna turn it over to the public, or do you want me to do the next part and then we'll go to public?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for this presentation, Mr. Urbano, Ms. DeAndrea. I know this is also hard decision for the board, also hard for you, that I know that we all don't want to cut any, right? We want to raise the salary to teachers and retain as many as we could. We could provide up-to-date facilities and top-tier technology to our students, right? Enable all your salary too. But yeah, thank you for your, working on this, hard project to make the sustainable plan. Thank you.
Sorry, the 6.74, so you said that was a recommendation to us based on calculations, but like some towns are going higher than that?
I haven't heard of, maybe one that we've heard of, but I can't confirm
A
because
little over 7,
a
I
lot
think
of,
is the
a
highest
lot of
number.
districts are adopting their budgets this week.
So like also inversely, if we raise per 1%, we'd be like saving.
Right, well, no,
approximately
this is the
30%.
maximum we can go
Oh,
to.
it's maximum.
Yeah.
I looked at there were other options, cap banking, there is none. This was the only waiver that I saw that we qualified for, so we asked to use it.
This is the highest that you could go. You certainly can go lower. And what we will do with the board, as other districts adopt their tentative budgets, which is happening, the next few days probably,
Yeah,
into next week.
Friday's the deadline.
Friday's the deadline, okay, so we will collect that information and share with the board. Because it is important to have perspective and to see, but every district has different financial, circuits. So you may see some tax levy increases recommended in the lowest 3% and as high as over 7%. We're on the high end.
So with that, I just, for the board, I handed out, I use this format, it's actually from the state. This is what I've been working on the last several weeks, it's the state format. Some of the other things that we have to address, and the auditor did address it earlier, for the board, if you go to, it says, line 580, budgeted fund balance, operating budget. And again, we're emphasizing the fact, for 24-25, the district used $2.2 million of fund balance. Right underneath it, you also use $350,000 from maintenance reserve to balance your budget. Really, it was 2.5 million to balance your budget in 24-25. The current year budget is 1.8. The most conservative approach that Mr. Albano and I felt, we are still putting $1 million out of fund balance into next year's budget. That's a drop of $811,000. That impacted some of these cuts. You have to understand that. It impacted because we lost some revenue stream. And then we had this conversation today about, well, what more can you do? Even if we didn't use the 1 million, we're back to the 1.4 plus whatever we generate this year. On the expense side, I already indicated we're at 500. Mr. Albano showed you a slide that, based on the people that we enrolled, we know we have a $400,000 bill that we have to make up this year. We're working to see what avenues we have. So are we gonna generate $1.8 million? No. We don't have the money to put back. It's gonna be another deficit. So we are going to $1 million. We feel comfortable that we can use it, we will, but it's gonna have an impact moving forward year after year. So we have to work together. The other area that the district, although it does reflect in here, is a line item 430, extraordinary aid. The audited number for 24-25 shows you $836,000. That's the money I alluded to that we used this year. It was actually last year's revenue, 24-25 revenue, but because the district did not budget for it, you were allowed to use it this year. So this year, again, we estimated increasing revenues for that line item by $600,000. So we're looking at different avenues. Mr. Albano and I spoke today. Well, Midio, what has been your practice? My practice, and maybe it's from my prior experience, and years ago, when districts voted on their budgets, I happened to be in the district. My first 8 or 9 years in that district, 7 of those budgets failed. So I had a mechanism with the town's business administrator. I used to deliver my budget before it even went out to vote. We both knew what was coming. So I knew back then we looked for every revenue. So again, extraordinary aid is not a given. So in the budget document, it shows 836. I usually stay around 80% of a prior year number, so we're putting in 600, again, to help manage the deficit that we saw. I'm not gonna go through all of the expenditures, we'll save that for the adopted budget. But again, I can share with you, we worked with the administration. We're doing our best to find avenues not to impact education. We looked at the areas that we couldn't just sit here and say teaching staff and everybody else is okay. We looked at every area. Our facilities, not that I'm an expert, but there's a general rule based on square footage, how much a custodian should be able to clean on a 7-8 hour basis. It's kind of how we came up with the aid. We looked at that. So there are going to be impacted on efficiencies and things of that nature. So we're doing our best to minimize the impact. But we were faced with some serious challenges. The use of fund balance is probably one of the biggest, and then you take the impact of state health benefits. So we're going to continue to balance and see where we wind up, and hopefully a month from now that the cuts aren't as deep and we'll find other resources and mechanisms. But again, we sat for a good 3 hours today. Schedules, aid placements, how are kids working in classrooms? It's an evolving process, and it's not an easy one. And we're doing our best. You heard that 1, 2, 3. So we basically have 4 new people in the admin office, and the one stable person has resigned and moving on. So we're going to have a fifth new person in your central office. So we're all working together to try and learn the district to the best of our abilities to make sure that we're doing what's right for the education of kids. So, we wish we had better news, but we're gonna continue to work together as an administrative team, to give you a budget that gives you the best efficient, education for the kids.
Thank you, Mr. Review. Now we're going to our work session to discuss our business agendas. First, education. Mr. John, would you read the agenda, please?
Education for field trips be it resolved that the Palisades Park Board of Education, on the recommendation of the superintendent, approves the following field trips. The destination is to Fairview Lake YMCA Camp. And the date, it says March 2nd, but we revised it to June 1st, 2026.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion, road trip? If not, next finance. Mr. Jun Lim is not here in our meeting tonight, so I'll just read the 7 agendas. 1, acceptance of fiscal year 2025 audit and annual comprehensive financial report. 2, tentative budget resolution. As they explained, the total general fund is $33,784,194. So total is $39,640,682. That will be, the local tax portion will be $29,049,132. And also there's a note that there will be the budget hearing meeting on April 29th, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. at the Early Child Center. Number 3, Treasurer's Report, September 2025, for acceptance of furniture donation from Palisades Park Public Library. Thanks to the board members of Public Library for their generous donation. And number 5 and 6, we will table it.
Withdrawn.
Yeah. So we're discussing next meeting, since we need, the administrators would need to clarify further decisions. And number 7, agreement with Bergen County Technical Schools to provide technology support services to our district between April 1st, 2026 to June 30, 2026. Do you have any questions?
For technology support, so we're looking at,
It's new IT
yes,
support.
what kind of, is it gonna be enough?
We're meeting tomorrow. We have our technology coordinator has submitted a resignation, so this is to cover that. So if we need more, I would come back to the board, but I'm hoping that that is sufficient. It's very reasonably priced though, and yes, we'll need to work out some details.
Any further questions in finance? discussion. Next, personnel, Mr. Soo-Kyung Park.
Okay, personnel, we have 4 agendas today. Number 1, resignation of staff. Number 2, resignation of assistant football coach. Number 3, appointment of a middle school dance coach. Number 4, appointment of a volunteer softball coach. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions?
Who was the dance coach before?
Which one?
In the middle school, who was the dance coach before, or is this just new?
Leave Rachel.
The
Oh, do
same
we have to do this
person.
every year?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
same person. No further questions? No? Next, negotiations, but I think we'll also table this agenda too for further discussion with PPAC.
Yes, this is requested. We're very close to a resolution on this. They did request just a little more time to discuss a few details. So probably you'll expect to have this at the next meeting recommended to you for approval.
Okay, we don't have another business. May I have a motion to close the working session and open to the regular session?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And virtual board presence, what I just wanna say is thank you to everyone that it's been a very busy month. And we just had our regular meeting last week, and since that, we all are busy with budget meeting and for today's meeting too, and audit presentation, the order review of all the documentation. It's been heavy. It's a big volume of all documentation that we have to go through and review. And my special thanks to our administrators. I know since the last meeting that I see them came out the office very late. And we talk about the budget and the weekends and after their working hours too. Thank you. And all board members, some of you sent to me your tax property bill during the weekends, so I sent it to Mr. Medio. So we all have helped each other and we discussed about the budget and our financial situation too. And I guess still again, it's a hard decision for us to approve this plan, but I think we need to base our financial state of our school district to survive and for the sustainable future for our education, decent education, hopefully in a few years too. So, Mr. Urbano, do you have any any report?
No special report this evening. Wanted to focus on the budget, but thank you to the Finance Committee and the board for many long hours of hard work. We appreciate it.
Thank you. So education. We have a motion to approve one agenda under education for field trip.
I'll second.
All in favor? Yeah. Finance, we have total 5 consent agenda. Excluding number 5, emergency group repairs. We also removing authorization for transfer from capital reserve, number 6. So we are approving number 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 5 consent agenda. May I have a motion?
A second.
Roll call please. Ms. Cho? Yes? Ms. Yoke?
Yes.
Mr. Justin Young?
Yes.
Ms. Boyoung Yoo?
Wait, so this is with the increase that you're saying, this 6 point, I'm gonna say no for number 2 of finance.
So
Yes,
except the
everything
number
else.
2, you approve other later. Yes. Ms. Susan Park? Yes. Mr. Aaron. So, yes, so all resolution has been passed in finance. Next, personnel. May I have a motion to approve full personnel agendas? Any second?
Second.
Or, would you do a roll call? Ms. Suchong? Yes? Ms. Ingyo-Kim?
Yes.
Mr. Justin Zhang?
Yes.
Ms. Boyoung Yu?
Aye.
Ms. Sugyung Park?
Yes.
Mr. Aaron Park?
Yes.
Okay, slow negotiations and. Just to clarify, Ms. Bo, may I ask you your explanation that the reason that you, take up the number 2 in finance, so you're not agree with this tax increase?
Not in
Number.
full, no.
No, okay. But you know that because I remember that last year you were the only one of 2 board members opposed to the step up due to the budget struggle. So, remember that we need the sources to retain, we need money to retain all the staff. That's one reason that we increased this percentage of tax increase too.
It passed anyway, so now.
Yeah,
Might
so I'm
not
just
matter.
explaining that there should be money if we're gonna retain the staff and teachers. So, alright, so may I have a motion to close our regular session and open our meeting to the public?
Also.
All in favor? In order to conduct its meeting properly and efficiently, the board shall require the following procedures to public participation at board meetings. An individual desiring to speak should give his or her name, address, and group, if any, that is represented. The presentation shall be as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes per individual. The board vests in its presence or other presiding officer authority to terminate the remarks of any individual if he deems it in the best interest of those present to do so. Anyone in public? No. If not, may I have a motion to close our public participation session?
I'll make a motion.
All in favor? Thank you. Public, thank you for coming this meeting tonight, and we'll go on the closed session to discuss the legal matters and personal matters. It might take up to at least 30 minutes. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you.